then a scrutiny committee is here to look at the performance of the council over the past few months, and also to analyse some of the proposals that we have going forward. To assist us with this, we have a number of technical officers in the background keeping the whole show on the road, also some council officers who will provide information, and the council executive members who will be making decisions about some of the things that we are talking about. And we also have members of the public who are going to speak and let us know what they think of either the council's performance or its future plans. We have 6 councillors on the scrutiny committee tonight, as you can see on the screens in front of you. We have apologies from Councillor Dave Taylor, who can't be with us tonight. Due to the COVID restrictions, this Economy and Place Scrutiny Committee meeting is being broadcast on YouTube. Other tubes are available, where it will be for posterity if you want to review what was said and anything that was agreed. Should this committee need to make a vote tonight, we also have a democratic officer present who can take that vote. Okay. As we go through the evening scrutinising the various topics, if any of the councillors want to speak, they will raise their virtual blue hand, which I can see, but unfortunately viewers on the webcast won't. I will bring you in the order that I've seen your hands raised. If during the subject that we're talking about you want to make a further supplementary point, just to raise your real physical hand, and I'll bring you in again in the order that I see those being raised. Okay. The first point that we have on our agenda: does anybody need to declare any interests to do with any of the business that we are looking at tonight? Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Just in relation to agenda item 5, York Station Frontage, it is on my register of interest, but I am an employee of LNER, which is obviously a very relevant business to this scheme. All views that I express this evening will be my own. I haven't. It's a non-prejudicial impact. Sorry, a non-prejudicial interest. But clearly, I need to wear a different hat as a councillor tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Hook.
Just wanted to say that the third member in my support bubble actually works for Network Rail. Again, I've hardly spoken to her in a long time.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. Any other interests amongst members? No, just one for myself then. I have a business interest. The landlord of that business interest is also the owner of Cycle Heaven, or one of the owners of Cycle Heaven, which I think comes up in the station frontage report. So I need to declare that interest. And also just not so much of an interest, but those of us that sit on main planning may well be being asked to look at some of the proposals that are being discussed in the station frontage at some point. So we will have to be cautious in terms of how we speak about that going through the meeting. Okay, thank you all very much for that. If we can now move to the next point in the agenda, which is public participation, and I believe we have 4 speakers this evening. So if we could introduce the first speaker, please, who I believe, if my running order is as is Tony May. Is that right? Do we have Mr. May?
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. I'm ready to speak. Ready for me.
Thank you. Yes, you have 3 minutes, Mr. May.
Thank you very much. I'm speaking on behalf of York Civic Trust, and we very much welcome the proposals to enhance the frontage of York Station and to improve both public realm and interchange. But we're concerned that in 2 specific ways, the proposals currently fail to achieve the improvements in sustainable transport to which the city aspires. The first concerns long-stay parking. The proposals include a 636-space multi-storey car park designed to replace what is there at the moment. There are going to be a further 482 on the York Central side of York Station, and together those give a capacity roughly equal to all the public parking within the city walls. The One Planet York assessment in your documents, it's question 313 if you want to refer to it, suggests that car use will be reduced, but this clearly is not the intention as things stand. The Council has set itself a target of being carbon neutral by 2030. It doesn't, as I understand it, yet have a strategy for achieving this, but West Yorkshire Combined Authority does, and it has committed to a 21% reduction in car use. We argue that the council should be doing the same, and that imposing such a target on long-stay parking at the station would be a valuable first step. Long-stay station car parking contributes very little to the city's economy and adds to congestion and air pollution, as well as the city's carbon burden. And replacing it by improved park and ride provision and direct bus services would offer a much more sustainable solution. Then, turning to bus service provision itself, the frontage enhancements offer a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to provide a purpose-built interchange, allowing all York's bus services to serve the station. This requires sufficient capacity at stops for 75 buses each way, each hour, and with 35 of them turning. The consultant's submission claims that 5 bus stops will accommodate 106 buses per hour, but I've looked at the literature and it indicates an absolute maximum of between 50 and 75. So the 5 bus stops in each direction will, we suggest, be inadequate if we want to achieve that outcome. There's also a problem with the capacity of the loop road, and particularly its junction with Queen Street, for allowing buses to turn. We've raised both of these issues in our submission back in August, and we're a little concerned that there hasn't been an opportunity to discuss them since. And in the interests of achieving a sustainable design for this important interchange...
If you could be winding up, please, Mr. May.
We ask that consideration of the planning application be deferred until these design issues have been effectively addressed. And of course, as ever, we are happy to assist in that process. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. May. Our next public speaker is Dave Merritt. Are you there, Mr. Merritt?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Then
yes,
we're good to go.
apologies.
Same applies. 3 minutes to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Chair, members and officers, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the York Environment Forum. Can I say we very much welcome the Council and partners' wish to change and improve the front of the railway station and applaud aspects of what is proposed in terms of helping pedestrians and cyclists. However, almost 2.5 years since we first wrote to the Council, in parallel with the Civic Trust and the Bus Forum, about the Council's initial proposals concerning the very retrograde public transport aspects in particular, we see that the latest iteration has not addressed those issues, besides adding the new multi-storey car park. These completely fly in the face of the Council's declaration of a climate emergency and of its intent to remove non-essential traffic from the city centre. Our primary concern is that this proposal seems to have been developed in isolation from the York Central proposals, the local plan and the local transport plan, as well as those Council decisions. It fails to develop a proper bus interchange as part of the proposals, as was envisaged in the original bid to the West Yorkshire Transport Fund. With a potential tripling of rail passengers anticipated and a quarter increase in local traffic overall indicated in the draft local plan, the plans for this primary access point for the city and equally critical location in an already excessively overloaded section of the Inner Ring Road should start from a coherent analysis of both the local access and wider transport demands in the city and how they can best be managed for the future. It doesn't take too long to realise that that involves reducing traffic, less parking, and better local public transport. It's therefore incomprehensible that these proposals involve worsening public transport facilities in terms of the existing stops being pushed down the road away from the station, losing the benefit of the covered eastbound stops outside the portico, and providing a third-rate bus turnaround facility. Equally incomprehensible is why only limited bus stop capacity is being added, as Tony May has just indicated to you. Why are we not taking the opportunity to expand the number of bus stops and future-proof, race day proof, rail replacement bus service proof the overall provision? Better turnaround provision also needs to be made for those services currently terminating in other parts of the city centre, like the Easingwold, Selby, number 9 park and ride services, number 8 park and ride service, which can terminate here with minimum turnaround delays.
If you can be winding up, please, Mr. Merritt.
The circuitous route around the Railway Institute. Recognise this, we're at a late stage now, so our main proposal would be to suggest that the council and partners briefly pause the current plans to at least future-proof the current proposals and ensure that this major investment of public funds delivers a solution that can accommodate future improvements for a bus interchange. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Your points are noted. The next public speaker that we have tonight is Alan Robinson. Are you there, Mr. Robinson?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir. You have 3 minutes to get your points across to the Scrutiny Committee, starting now.
Hello, yes, thank you for listening. I represent York Bus Forum, and I've taken quite an interest in the station front project in the past. I don't need to rehearse the case for much better public transport, I don't think. It's on grounds of congestion, air quality, sustainability, carbon emissions, and CYC policy. The station front project, as others have said, is an opportunity to take steps in that direction, in the direction we'd like to see, which is the best intervention possible within the budget available. Now, we've identified important improvements that we think must be made in a number of areas, and we're keen to discuss how we can do that. We've heard it said the scheme reduces carbon emissions, but it's pretty clear it could do more, and therefore it should. We agree a good pedestrian experience should be a high priority, and this is another area where significant improvements can be made and we can propose them. The provision for buses will be inadequate, as Tony May has just said. That needs to be addressed. We have made alternative proposals, and we do think they're practical. Bus operators object to a classic hub and spoke bus station, but our proposals are based on a mix of terminating and flow-through services, so that shouldn't be seen as grounds for rejecting what we suggest. We've also made it clear we don't expect the current project to deliver a high-quality bus interchange that we'd ultimately like to see. We don't want something the budget can't afford, but it does appear that that too has been seen as grounds for rejection of what we think. We're only asking at this stage for first steps towards a high-class bus interchange. That means safeguarding future options. Our vision is for a future-proof scheme now, which does the groundwork, followed by a future-funded second phase. Bridge demolition would stay the same. Utility diversion should be done in a future-proof way, but there's no reason to think that it should cost more. We're very concerned our case hasn't received proper attention so far from both officials and councillors, and it certainly hasn't been countered convincingly. We therefore request that the application be deferred until we've had a chance to engage more fully with all the parties involved and with a willingness to change direction where it's necessary. The changes needn't be too great, and if we do it right, the outcome could be not just better, but excellent. The city deserves a high-class 21st century bus interchange, and the railway station is exactly the right place for it, and we'd welcome the opportunity to help shape it. Thank you. Oh, I made it in 3 minutes as well.
Hey, you certainly did, yes. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Robinson, for your points, which again are noted. And our fourth and final speaker tonight is Martin Higginson. Are you there, Mr. Higginson?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Same applies, Mr. Higginson. You have 3 minutes starting now.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Martin Higginson. I'm co-chair of the York Civic Trust Public Transport Subgroup. I'm also chairman of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport North East England Policy Committee. I've got 7 points that I want to try and get over in my 3 minutes. Firstly, they all relate to interchange between railways and bus services at York Station. Firstly, a need for clear signage with direct, minimised distance, step-free and safe walking between the station and the bus stops and the station and the city centre, which includes crossing over the various roads. If we're to have a single pedestrian crossing right outside the station, it must be a very wide super crossing capable of taking heavy use by a large number of pedestrians turning both left and right. It seems counterintuitive that city-bound bus stops require pedestrians to start walking away from town before they board their bus. This is something which may be difficult to fit in logistically, but is something that needs to be borne in mind. There need to be, as Tony May has said, sufficient bus stops to cater for both present and future expanded levels of bus services in each direction, including services that currently don't get any nearer to the station than Lehman Road, as well as those passing the front of the station. We would anticipate also that there will be additional services coming to the station, which at the moment don't get that far. I'm thinking of the rural and interurban services from places like Selby, Cawood and the A19 Easingwold corridor that need linking directly to the station. Park and ride services need to be very strongly marketed at the station so that people arriving in York can regularly use them. Park and ride services which don't get to the station need to be amended so that they can do it. 2A, if it continues to provide a circular service, maybe just have to improve the walking conditions to Lehman Road. Some Service 9 requires extension to the station from its present terminus at the Lendal Gyratory, and Service 8 terminates a mile away on the opposite side of the city centre. Maybe it could be either extended or joined onto another park and ride service such as 3 and 59 to provide an equivalently high quality interchange. And finally, the rail interchange function of park and ride services must be marketed strongly at the outer termini, at the park and ride sites, possibly through ticketing with rail, so that people feel as though they're making an inclusive journey. So that's a very quick sketch through my points. And as the other speakers have said, I think we need to pause the agreement to the policy to make sure that we get the public transport interchange and the quantity of bus stops aspects right before holes start being dug in the ground. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Higginson, for your points, which are noted. And thank you to all of our public speakers, and with the obvious proviso that this is not a planning committee meeting. I think there are some points that have been raised there that members might wish to consider when we come to discuss this item and make any recommendations or suggestions to the executive member, who is also with us tonight, and I'm sure was paying full attention to the points that have been raised. Okay, members, let's move on to the next part of our agenda, which is the Q1 Finance and Performance Monitor. For those who are watching at home, this is essentially how the city has performed in the first part of this financial year. Do we have an officer ready to present the report?
Yes, Chair. Patrick Looker, Finance Manager.
Hello, Patrick. You're very welcome.
Good evening.
If you'd like to introduce yourself and then talk.
Yeah, Patrick Looker, the Finance Manager for Economy and Place Directorate. The report presented to the committee this evening covers the first quarter finance and performance monitoring for Economy and Place Directorate. It summarises the data that was considered by the executive on the 1st of October last month. From a financial perspective, it's obviously been a challenging year for the Council and Economy and Place Directorate in particular. The report has identified that the Directorate is forecasting a shortfall in its budget of £8.2 million. As the report is written, it is assumed that this shortfall will be funded from a combination of the central government support grant to councils which has supported councils for their costs and lost income from COVID, which to date has totaled 12.6 million, as well as the government-funded income compensation scheme, whereby the government will reimburse councils for 75% of lost income in the year after the council funds the first 5% of any loss. The Directorate budgets for £22 million of income from fees, charges, rents, sales, licences, and there's been a significant impact on the Directorate revenues through the year. At Monitor 1, the forecast shortfall in income was 6.4 million for the year. The main impact has been on parking revenues, close to 4 million, planning and licensing income, close to 1 million, waste-related income, 2/3 of a million of income, transport-related income over 500,000, and commercial rents over 500,000. Of these income shortfalls, all but the commercial rents are expected to be eligible for the income compensation scheme. For commercial rents, they are deemed to be the council's risk. It has proved difficult to model income losses as the economy has moved from lockdown to reopening to tier 2 and back into lockdown. But the council has seen a loss of a number of revenues, most notably parking revenue, which is detailed in paragraph 9 in the report. With regards to expenditure, the Directorate is reporting COVID-related pressures totalling 1.7 million. Of this, 1.1 million related to the micro grant scheme that Executive agreed to fund in June. The other costs relate to additional waste costs as additional staff were required to deliver the socially distanced service in the early months. There's also been a number of costs within transport to fund measures to support social distancing across the highway. Regarding service performance, the report highlights those indicators that have improved in paragraph 19, as well as those that have dipped in paragraph 20. Annex A looks in further detail at the indicators supporting the council plan relating to this Directorate, and Annex B gives the dashboard from the KPI machine. I'm more than happy to answer questions regarding the financial side of the report. We've also got officers available who'll be able to support across performance issues.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much for that. And just for those of you watching at home, we're also joined on screen by Neil Ferris, who's the Director of Economy of Place. Over to the members. Do we have any questions, suggestions, clarifications? I have Councillor Daubney first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Patrick, for that overview of the financial situation that relates to the Directorate. Can I just ask, the central government funding, which will cover obviously much of the losses which we are expecting, and obviously we all understand the reasons for the shortfalls in income and so on. Can I just ask how close we are to a decision on that, and how, if so, how soon we might get that funding in to balance the books? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Well, we know we've received £12.6 million worth of income from the general support, and the scheme for lost income will be partly dependent on how much income is actually lost. So whilst we were doing the modelling before, we were assuming that we wouldn't go into lockdown. So for instance, November has seen a significant reduction in parking income. We will expect to be receive 3/4 of the lost income that we have had this month. So those numbers will flex. The sort of corporate position for the council is considered as part of the executive monitoring reports. There's another one going forward to executive on Thursday. What I'm trying to do in this one is just focus on the issues that relate to this particular Directorate and the economy in place. So as a finance team, and Debbie Mitchell is pulling together how that additional grants that we've received from income and from the government, as well as specific grants, how that will manage the overall council position. But it's fair to say it's challenging to balance the budget at the moment.
Right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. My question's about the statement around the financial health of Make It York. I mean, we all understand how they must have been impacted by the closing of attractions, the fact the Christmas market isn't taking place. So I'm just wondering what kind of work is being done with them to assess their financial position, and if it is deemed that the council needs to financially support them, how will that money be found from what is already a very stretched budget? And I may be wrong, but I'm assuming that this doesn't fall under central grant kind of classification, but please correct me if that's not right. Thank you.
Sure. There was a report was considered by shareholder committee earlier this month, looking at Make It York's financial position, and they have suffered significant income losses, as you would imagine, from events in the city centre. The Christmas markets being the one, probably the largest element of income that they actually received during the year, but also the Shambles market has seen income significantly dropping. Officers are currently in the process of pulling a report together that will be considered by executive in December, I believe, is the plan at the moment, and it will. The financial ask from Make It York will be considered at that particular meeting.
On the forward plan.
Okay, thank you. Oh, is that supplementary, Councillor Douglas? Fire away.
Thank you. Yeah, and can you tell me that if the council does need to financially support Make It York, how that money will be found? Will it qualify as a central grant replacement of income or not? Does anybody know?
It won't be included in the income compensation scheme because the income hasn't come direct from the loss to the council. It's been lost to a company from the council, but as part of any support that the council will have to give, that will have to come from general grants that we've received from the government to support us through the epidemic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Members, anybody else got any questions or clarifications or suggestions? Not picking anything up from other members present. Okay, well, if you will indulge me then. Just in terms of the, obviously the planning applications falling off a cliff with 50% reduction in planning applications, what's the long-term lag of that likely to be? Is it something that happens because we weren't able to process them, or is it people have lost confidence in terms of not wanting to build?
I think in
do we know? Maybe that's one for you, Neil.
Yeah, I was going to say in Q1, in terms of this financial year, they dropped off because effectively there was a response to the lockdown. That's picked up dramatically since, and the confidence in the housing market in particular is very, very strong in York, both from a developer perspective for planning applications, but also from an interest for alongside our commercial portfolio. We have a number of discussions with fellow investors in the city, and there's a lot of interest in the city in those developments. So I think my response to that will be very short-term effect due to the uncertain nature of the first lockdown, but it seems certainly small extensions have gone absolutely through the roof in terms of people undertaking extensions of their houses, as I understand. And the bigger projects, whilst they've slowed down, they're all still being brought forward by those major developers. So I've not seen a long-term impact.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Councillor Pearson, I'll come to you in just a second. Just a supplementary on that. Do we have the capacity within the planning department to process all the backlog in a timely fashion?
Yes.
Okay.
Lots of the small applications don't require a huge amount of approval.
Okay, Councillor Pearson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and thanks for the report. I was going to ask about point 19 on the agenda supplement, page 5, I think it is. And you talked about some of the indicators. There's some really good headline stuff there about roads graded poor and very poor. There's a lot, a significant reduction this year versus previous years, and also that more affordable homes are being built and all the rest of it. I'm just wondering if that, particularly on that road one, is that a picture that is reflective across all grades? Are we gradually getting a situation where the roads are all getting to a better state? And I guess with one eye on the future and the fact that budgets will be under scrutiny going forward, how we can keep that up going forward.
Okay, I'll let James answer the specific question about all the grades, but all I would respond, Councillor Pearson, in terms of that as you say, there's some really great performance there is that, just from my perspective as Director of Economy and Place, all of our services have been maintained throughout this year. There was a small period where we didn't have green waste refuse collections and household waste recycling centres last Easter, but I'd like to put it on public record, the support that I've received and across my whole workforce has been absolutely commendable through a very difficult summer. So to have figures like this appearing first quarter is excellent. And in terms of performance overall, I think we'll see that the council services have weathered very, very well in terms of the ones that we're directly delivering. So I'm very pleased with that outcome. I'll let James answer the question on highway infrastructure.
Sorry, could you just repeat the question, Councillor Pearson, please?
Sorry, if I can just introduce yourself, James. You've just suddenly appeared on the thousands of YouTube watchers' video screens, and I'm wondering who you are. So if you want to just introduce yourself.
I'm James Gilchrist. I'm Assistant Director for Transport, Highways and Environment. And apologies.
Thank you, James. And Ed, what was the question?
I was just, paragraph 19 on page 5, we've talked about the fact that roads graded poor and very poor in the authority have decreased. So I think in 2018 there were 23% in that category, and this year it's 20%, which the 3% reduction sounds fantastic, and yeah, definitely in the right direction. From all the complaints and stuff that we get from residents. I'm just wondering if that picture of improvement is reflective across the other grades, like 3, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Is it generally getting better across the board?
I think it's a balance. I'd need to go away and look at the exact figures, and we could share those with the committee if that would help. But if you invest in the poorest roads, it costs more. What we are trying to do increasingly is balance that spend. So can we improve roads in that middle category? It's good asset management, but can we prolong the lifespan of those that haven't yet got to the poorest and deal with some of those poorest? So historically, what councils have done is invested in their worst condition roads, but it's a never ending feat. You spend an awful lot of money repairing a little bit of road, and it just keeps getting further and further away from you. What DfT have advised, and councils and indeed York have done, is to start to spread that spend in asset management terms in a bit more detail, so that you'll be trying to prolong the life of those that haven't yet got to that category, because that's a cheaper, better use of money, as well as trying to do some of that repair. So actually that strategy is starting to pay off in starting to see that backlog slowly reduce. We're not getting as many deteriorating to that level, and we're trying to chip away at those. So I think there's a couple of factors on it, but we'll get the full breakdown of that information for the committee if that would help.
Sure, thanks. Councillor Pearson, is that supplementary?
It's just supplementary. Yeah, the other part of the question was just with one eye on the future, how we can keep that picture going forward, especially when we know that next year budgets are going to be that much more constrained.
Yeah, I think it's about having an agreed strategy to do exactly that piece of work I talked about in terms of investment. Executive considered a report, I tried to think how long ago, 18 months ago now probably, about a highways investment plan. That piece of work is ongoing. It's got delayed thanks to COVID and floods and things like that by the highways team, but it is a piece of work we are progressing, and we'll be bringing back to executive to outline that, how you invest and get the best value and best performance out of that investment. There are inevitably choices that can be made about materials, versus lifespan and those sorts of things, but that report will try to set out that best possible balance to get the best possible performance. Highway investment is always a sliding scale. There's never enough money for it, you could argue. So making sure that whatever full council decide to invest in in highway maintenance, we get the best value for, is I think the right approach. So we'll be updating that policy soon.
Okay, thank you. Just a word of warning. I think my internet is a little bit glitchy tonight. I think it must be my turn tonight to do a bit of the Norman Colliers. So if I go, we'll have to get it up and going again. Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment on page 18 of the report, which had the section on bins, and you've got a green arrow on the bin collection, and it's got like missed bins were 30.38 in just 1 quarter, compared with 50.85 the whole year before and 48.65 the year before that, and yet it was marked green. So I don't quite understand why it was green.
Want me to come in on that as well, Neil?
And do you?
So I think part of the green arrow is that it compares the quarter-on-quarter performance. So it compares each quarter's performance, which it doesn't help because it doesn't show the that quarter's performance from the previous year. I think the other thing to bear in mind is it's not a cumulative figure from memory, and I haven't got it in front of me at the moment, but from memory that is a number of complaints per 1,000 collections, so it doesn't add up over the year. It's an indicative one. So actually 30 for a quarter doesn't mean that 30 carries into the next one. It's how many you get because you'll be doing more collections. So actually it's a relative drop compared to last year because it's about the it's almost like a percentage, if that makes sense.
Okay. Any more questions from members? No. Just a quick one from me then. The obviously the loss of parking revenue equated to about half of our overall deficit. Are there any plans afoot, bearing in mind some of the things we've already heard tonight and the council's commitment to reduce unnecessary car journeys through the city centre? Are there any plans afoot to wean us off dependency on car parking revenue?
Well, I think if people talk about car parking revenue and the council's commitments, council's principal commitments is carbon neutral by 2030, and government's announced the bringing forward of the ban on sales of all fuel vehicles for 2030. So it's not that there will necessarily any less cars or choice for the public in terms of how they travel. So I think there's a misconnection between council policy and cars. Just highlight that the council's revenue that it gets from car parking is substantial compared to other authorities, and that means that the council tax in York stays low, for example, and indeed the level of investment that we have in transport is, when you look at other areas, quite significant in terms of some of the sustainable transport measures that we have in place in the scheme. So it's not that cars are, should we say, predicted to disappear in any time soon.
Is that a no then, Neil, to my question?
Well, yeah.
There are no plans to wean us off car parking revenue.
There's no plans at this stage to.
Sorry, James, do you want to come in?
Encourage car parking in the city is what I'm saying, other than and in terms of the car-free park.
No, a no's a no. That's fine. It's an answer. James.
The only flip side to it, I would say, is the amount of investment that's going into electric car park charging across the city. So actually, in terms of park and ride sites and within the city centre, what we're trying to do is move that car park experience from one of being a carbon-based vehicle movement to as electric as possible, and trying to move that principle. Actually, if you come into the city centre, we'd much rather it was an electric vehicle than a petrol vehicle.
Thank you.
I would just
any more for any more.
I would just
yes,
add
Patrick.
I would just add that parking revenues is a consideration every year as part of the budget, and if we were to reduce the expectation of parking revenues, we'd have to find alternative savings elsewhere across the council or increase revenues from other areas. So that's very much a political decision that's considered each year in the budget.
Thank you, Patrick. Any more for any more? Just one last suggestion from me, man, and I promise you this is my last one. It might be useful in terms of the reports. There's a great amount of detail at the back of the reports that Councillor Hook's already referred to. Given we're going to be talking about inclusive growth in the next item, it might be really useful if we could put some measure of inequality in the city. So there are things that kind of refer to it. But you know, if you look at the median wage in there, it's about 520 odd pounds a week or something like that. Well, there'll be quite a lot of people in the city that earn a lot more than that, and even more people who earn a lot less. So is it possible to put some measure of equality or inequality into the reports? Yes, Neil.
Yeah, so Councillor Waller has just instigated quarterly economic performance reports being brought to his decision session So there'll be quite a much more detailed set of indicators on the economy going to Councillor Waller's decision session on a quarterly basis from now on. So that should be able
does that include an inequality index?
I don't know what you mean by an inequality index, Councillor Kilbane. But there are
the difference between rich and poor.
But those exactly. So what does that mean? If you can refer me to some
well, I don't think we're going to decide that in this meeting here tonight, Neil. So hence the suggestion that maybe that's something we should look at in terms of the best way of reflecting that in the report, especially if we're going to be talking about inclusive growth. Okay, any more? Just remains for me to say thank you very much, Patrick, Neil and James, for that very, very interesting, very useful information, and thank you, members. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda. We have, he says, looking for his agenda, it's the Economic Strategy and Partnership. Neil, I assume you'll be staying with us for this one, and we're joined by Simon and Tracy. Simon and Tracy, would you like to introduce yourselves to the tens of thousands of people now watching on YouTube? Oh, and we're also joined by the Executive Member for Economy and Place, Councillor Andrew Waller. So Simon, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. Simon Burton, I'm the Head of Economic Growth at City of York Council.
And
Thank you. And Tracy.
Tracy Carter, Director of Place, Interim Director of Place with responsibility for economy regeneration and property and housing.
Thank you. And Andrew, you need no introduction, but would you like to introduce yourself to the watching public anyway?
Right, I'm Councillor Andrew Waller. I'm Executive Member for Economy and Strategic Planning.
Okay, thank you. And who is going to talk us through this scrutiny report? Who's going to lead on it?
I'm going to do that.
Okay, thank you, Simon. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So this report that's with you has been referred from Councillor Waller's decision session on the 21st of October. It's a report about the economic strategy and partnership, updating on where we'd got to. It's the first report. The previous report on this topic actually came to the March decision session just before the lockdown began. And of course, since then, we have seen a massive impact from COVID on the economy, and that's still playing out. There are still 9,400 people furloughed in York, and until we get through all the lockdown, it's impossible to know exactly what the impacts are going to be from all of that. It's impacted clearly our development of the economic strategy, which at that point we had planned would have been adopted by now, having completed the work over the summer. You won't be surprised to hear that we moved our priorities to supporting local businesses, running things like the micro grant scheme, and working very carefully with the business community. And it's impacted more positively, I would say, in terms of our partnership working and engagement. We set out some of the work that we've done in the report, but really I'd highlight the level of engagement that we've had with the business community over the summer. We continue to have very regular meetings with all of the business support networks involving the Federation of Small Businesses, the Chamber of Commerce, the Institute of Directors, York Bid, the university, and of course our colleagues at Make It York. And we're now in the position where we're sending out weekly business bulletins, which are going direct to over 1,000 businesses, and indirectly to another 2,500 or so businesses, to something like half of the business community of York we are now in touch with. So that's been a huge sea change really in terms of our level of engagement with the business sector over the summer, and reflects some of the things that we hoped to do when we were originally talking about engagement on the economic strategy way back in February and March. We're now in a position where, following I'd also just highlight that this decision was made on the 21st of October, just before we've gone into the current lockdown. So the world continues to change around us. However, it is now time to renew our work on the economic strategy and to begin to build on that partnership working we've been doing over the summer to put in place an economic partnership and other partnerships to support our work. As we say in the report, the approach that we want to continue with is really what we'd already set out in March. So that's a kind of two-pronged approach. Firstly, to continue what's been a very long established economic strategy in York to focus on growing well-paid jobs. It was interesting to hear when you were all giving talking this earlier on around the things you needed to report, the number of connections you all have to the rail industry, and of course the rail industry in York continues to be really important and is actually a source of well-paid jobs in our city. But as well as that, we all know connections with insurance and financial services in York, with IT and digital, and probably many of us know people who work in those sectors. There are also many creative businesses in York, and a growing number of biotech and life sciences businesses, perhaps not a sector that there are quite so many people in York, but something we would like to see growing. And we will continue to grow jobs in those sectors by working on inward investment, both in terms of bringing in foreign direct investment, but also probably more importantly, thinking about where else we get people to come to York from within the UK, and indeed supporting our existing business stock of something like 7,000 businesses in York to grow and continue to create new employment. That approach has done well over the last 15 years. It doesn't mean that everybody is in a well-paid job, far from that, but it does mean that most of the job growth we've seen over that period has actually been in well-paid, high-skilled jobs. And I'm pleased to see that statistics recently released by the government show that in 2019 there was a further increase of employment in York, so it's now up to 111,000 people working in the city, about 6,000 more than it was 5 years ago. So we are seeing continued job growth, and indeed the annual survey of hours and earnings that's just been released as well shows that while there are some challenges in COVID, those statistics relate to March of this year, so just as we were entering COVID, we have seen particularly continued increase in full-time pay for female workers, well above the national average now, the pay that full-time female workers in York get, and also continued growth in pay elsewhere. So we want to continue that approach to continue to grow well-paid jobs in our key sectors. But also, as we've said many times in the past, we also want to...
Sorry, Simon. Councillor Daubeny, we've lost the chair. You are the vice chair. If you were happy and the members were happy, maybe you could. Oh, I stopped myself. Councillor Kilbane has reappeared.
Thank you. Shall I continue?
Apologies for that. Yeah, I'm hoping one of the kids isn't playing on the PlayStation. I'm now running this through my phone, so hopefully this will survive. If that one goes down, then you've lost me, I'm afraid. Okay, apologies, Simon, if you'd like to continue.
Thank you. I was just saying, as well as that focus on growing well-paid jobs in our key growth sectors, we also want to renew our focus on inclusive growth, as has been alluded to before. And we have, with this Scrutiny committee, we did do some work earlier this year looking at inclusive growth and what that means, and looking at some of the statistics around that. I'm not going to repeat those statistics here, but I would say that, clearly I've highlighted some of the sectors that produce well-paid jobs in York. There are very large sectors in York: tourism, hospitality, retail, social care, that provide lots of employment, provide lots of flexible part-time employment, which is really important for household incomes, but they are not the best paid sectors in the economy. And indeed, many of those are sectors of the economy that have been particularly impacted through COVID. So seeing how those sectors emerge from the current pandemic is really important, but so too is thinking how we work with people in those sectors to help them grow their qualifications and find opportunities for retraining, as well as trying to find more, bring other jobs to York which don't necessarily require a high level of qualification, but do provide good pay. So those two twin tracks are then underpinned by two themes. One around what we talk about as 21st century jobs. So those are jobs which are flexible and family friendly, which provide opportunities for training and development and for lifelong learning linked to the economy. It's the flexibility that working from home has provided for many people is really important, and I hope that we can continue some of that work as we develop the economic strategy and as we think about how we develop York's economy in the future. And then looking at a green economic recovery and thinking what that means in terms of retraining people working in already in industries that will be affected by a green agenda, whether that's helping tradespeople to learn how to fit renewable energy sources as well as doing plumbing, or whether that's around looking at some of our larger employers and their premises and their working practices. Also thinking about the green jobs in terms of inward investment and in terms of how we help all businesses to help us collectively address the challenges we've set ourselves as a city to become carbon neutral. The evidence base which underpins all of this is being refreshed at the moment. As I've just highlighted some of the statistics that have just come out. Those we'll be working on those over the next few weeks and months and bringing more information through Councillor Waller's decision sessions, through the quarterly economic update, and indeed supporting other papers that we bring to other committees. We recognise there are some gaps in the evidence base. Some of those relate to things like the longer term impacts of COVID on workspace requirements. There are to some extent unanswerable questions at the moment, but they are gaps that we must recognise, and we must think carefully about what that means, about what our city needs in terms of its infrastructure. In terms of engagement to support our economic strategy, we were talking way back in March about our need to go out and consult with businesses and with communities, and also really importantly to make sure that we build in the lived experience of those who haven't done so well in the economy, to make sure that we produce an economy that's fit for all. The work we've done on engagement with businesses has been, as I said earlier, is a real kind of step change in terms of engagement there. I'll work with the sector roundtables, with the business leaders group, and as I say, with those regular calls with those business expert networks are really important. We've also supported the Federation of Small Businesses to grow its membership to 1,500 in York. So that's nearly 1 in 5 of all businesses in the city members of the FSB, which puts us in a very strong position in terms of being able to understand the needs, particularly of small businesses, both short-term and longer term. We want to work with all of those businesses to inform our skills plan, which is not strictly part of this report, but is a very closely aligned piece of work that we'll be doing. And we want to work with the business leaders group that's been established to take us through COVID, to expand that out and help it to become an economic partnership with a broader range of voices on, but that is very clearly also continues to be business led. We've really benefited, as I say, from that direct engagement with businesses that we've been able to do over the summer. So we are hoping to have a strategy complete by the end of March, ready to go to executive in something like May of next year. As I said, I won't go through all the detail that there is in the report. There's a lot summarised in there. And I'm also not brought to you the current updated evidence base that is still developing, and analysis is ongoing over the next couple of weeks around that, and you will see more to come. But I hope that presents you with enough to consider how you see the development of that economic strategy, and to reflect on those key themes and underpinning ideas that we're putting forward and that we propose to build the strategy around. Thank you.
It certainly does, Simon. We've got hands going up everywhere, and thank you very much for that report, which was a very interesting one. Okay, the order that I've got you in, apologies if I get this wrong because my internet dropped out, but I've got Councillors Hook, then Councillor Douglas, Councillor Daubney and Councillor Hollier in that order. So, Councillor Hook.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic that you're now reaching out to lots of other businesses and engaging with them. But I just wondered whether that covers the whole of the city or where the gaps are, because I'm very aware from where I sit that there's a lot of like industrial parks all around the outer ring road and even beyond. Are they being talked to? And also during the crisis, little local shops in little tiny shopping parades have been absolutely invaluable for helping the needs of people. And are they included in that too?
Thank you very much, Councillor Hook. On the first question, in terms of engagement, there are some maps, I think, in the appendix around the sector round tables which show the distribution of the businesses that were engaged there. They're from across the whole of the City of York Council area, so certainly not simply the city centre. We've done a lot of work with city centre businesses, don't get me wrong, but we've also been very careful to ensure that it's not just the city centre, and that we've got all of those business voices reflected. And we continue to work, for instance, with retail in Haxby and Acomb. We're really pleased to be able to be supporting the Christmas lights out there in the current season. We work with the Retail Forum and with Indie York, and of course Indie York represent independent shops anywhere within the ring road, not anywhere within City of York Council area. I know that's a particular bone of contention in Haxby, but anywhere within the ring road can be part of the Indie York network, and we are very supportive of that network and are working closely with them. The other thing I'd say is that the work we did on on micro grants, we gave out over 1,100 grants of £1,000 to tiny micro businesses across the city. They were spread all over the city, and they have actually given us really helpful inroads into the self-employed and into smaller businesses. And indeed, the FSB membership is well and truly across the whole of the city too. So I hope that we're reaching out. There's always more that one can do, but it's very much at the heart of our approach to focus on small, focus on local, and focus on what's actually important in the economy, not just in terms of GDP and GVA and turnover, but what's actually important at a community enterprise level as well. The economy is more than just numbers and money. It's around what we all do every day, and the more people we can get involved, the better.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I've seen you too, so you're on the list. Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to talk about the inclusive growth aspects of this, and it might not be surprising to you that I'm bringing this up. We had a very in-depth conversation at a previous Scrutiny committee meeting earlier in 2020. And I do think, well, perhaps I should say I can totally understand that we do need high-skilled, high-paid jobs in our city, but at the end of the day, we know that significant portions of our population are not employed in those types of jobs. And I think I would like to see more of an emphasis on how we move people from low-paid, low-skilled work, particularly in retail, hospitality and the care sectors, where we know at the last count there was over 30,000 people on furlough. I should say that's across industries in the city. But a high proportion of those furloughed people are in those industries, and 70% of those industries are women. So this is a really important area. And we did discuss in the inclusive growth discussion at that point about how we would get that voice into the planning for the economic strategy. And we did talk about external input from Joseph Rowntree Foundation or University of York, York St John's, and I'm just wondering what has happened on that, where we're at, and how they'll be integrated in a way that is meaningful. And I really do think that that voice needs to be on the business leaders group as well, because they need to assess what's being said and how that can feed through into inclusive growth and formulate the full structure. So if you could just update me on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Sorry, did I see Councillor Waller wanting to come in on?
Yeah, thanks. I'm sure that Simon will respond as well, but I just wanted to mention in specifics with Joseph Rowntree Foundation that I have been in discussions with Mike Hawking, who is a member of the Leeds City Region inclusive growth panel, of which I'm also a member, and so there's a lot of cross fertilization happening there in terms of how this voice is taken in. But so we're looking at how we can work together, and I know Simon has followed up some points of contact there, so it is very actively being engaged. We're just conscious that we need to get on with it.
Yeah, so absolutely. So yes, I mean, those things are important to all of us in terms of the inclusive growth agenda. As we've already highlighted, York is an expensive place to live in. We have a very high level of employment in York, but that's partly reflects that actually it's really hard to make ends meet at household level simply on one income in York. It's those part-time flexible roles which fit around other people's other family responsibilities, which are important. And that's when I talk about 21st century jobs as a key theme. It's as much on the inclusive growth side as it is in terms of growing high-paid sectors. Yes, inclusive growth is really important. In terms of the connections that we've made with Joseph Rowntree Foundations and others, yes, there are active conversations going on with JRF around what might be appropriate for them to join, what they might have the staff time to get involved in, and their willingness to engage around that at a city level when most of their work is national, but they are active conversations and we're working with them. We're also, as I said, making sure that we get that lived experience across through the partnership is really important. And I think that's where we'll see it move from being a business leaders group and turning into something which is closer to a proper economic partnership with all those other voices there. We are still doing that work of adapting the partnership. As you see, the paper on the 21st of October that you have in front of you included recommendations to expand the membership of the Business Leaders Group. We have met once since that report, just after we went into lockdown, and we retained a focus on immediate impacts on city centre businesses. So important at the moment. But we're moving on to begin to look at how we work around the skills and talent issues, the training issues, which are actually at the heart of, as you say, at the heart of inclusive growth in our city, helping people. I'd say it's around helping people to find better employment rather than taking people from one job into the other. It's around active engagement by citizens and people understanding what the opportunities are for them, and us doing everything we can to make sure that they're not prevented from what they're doing, what they might be able to do.
Okay, thanks, Simon. I'll come to Neil and Tracy in a minute. Councillor Douglas, was there a supplementary?
Yes, thanks for that. Yeah, I'm just a bit concerned about timeframes. I'm glad that conversations have been taking place, etc. I know that something very serious has got in the way since we last spoke. But can you tell me or give me a commitment that JRF or some other appropriate organisation is going to be engaged in a permanent way on development of this rather than just odd conversations? I really feel that we need to do something very concerted and permanent rather than dipping in and out when I think a lot will be missed if we do it in that way.
So we've reached out.
Councillor Waller has unmuted, so I think he's about to answer Simon, and then we'll come to you.
The offer is most certainly there. As Simon mentioned, that there is an issue of their own capacity, but we are trying to find ways in which there would be an ongoing relationship, and equally with the two universities, that they have considerable expertise, and I'm aware that Simon has spoken with both in terms of their experience and the information they could bring on that specific issue about inclusive growth and how you measure it. At the Leeds City Region LEP meeting, there was a long discussion about charters and the ways in which you can measure it. So I think that they are having discussions about how that is measured, but there is the offer is there. It's just, as you mentioned, many organisations are dealing with COVID themselves, and therefore it's not the same as it was in January in terms of engaging with organisations, but there is the serious intention that there is a long-standing link being created.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Waller. Okay, I've got Simon, Tracy and Neil, and if you can be concise, because I've got a whole queue of councillors waiting to come here.
I just wanted to underline that the universities and the educational institutions within the city have got a formal, ongoing, permanent role within the business engagement that we have, that they've been helping guide our way through the development of the recovery strategies, and are now helping us concentrate on trying to pull the economic strategy into close focus for what needs to now be a fairly tight timescale to get this through to executive. And the same goes for the engagement of the TUC in the skills panel as well. So these are not just informal conversations, they are formally constituted groups where we have ongoing discussions.
Thank you. Neil, concisely, please.
Yeah, very quickly. Obviously, the other side of the piece is that we want to look at, and I think the economic strategy needs to look at how we increase the value of working in the social care sector and the retail sector. So obviously, they're really important parts of our economy. So making sure that people can have equitable wages in those sectors is again something I think we need to look at, and we'll be addressing in our strategy. It's not just about good jobs, bad jobs. It's making sure people get paid well in the jobs that the society needs.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Daubney.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Simon, for going through the report for us. I just wanted to pick up the points from your paragraph 17, where you're talking about the change, alteration in the demand for office space in the city. Now, you'll know as well as I do, just for just how long we focused on both inward investment and the need for increasing the amount of grade A office space in the city. Can you sort of elaborate on a little bit, perhaps, on how that demand for office space will change, and how much businesses will say, well, we don't need quite so much office space because we have people working at home, just so we can demonstrate this evening to the public. But also, will they be willing to have a more informal approach to in collaboration between colleagues, which I think we all miss as councillors and officers. Just a chance to have a coffee, just sit down, discuss ideas, discuss progress on projects and so on. I just wonder how you might be thinking that's going to play out in the city. Thank you.
Tracy, you were indicating you wanted to come in there. Simon, I'm trying to give your voice a rest as much as I can. You've done a big report tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. We had a similar discussion to this last night at Corporate Scrutiny when we're talking about the council's own requirements for office space going forwards. And I think this is one area where what was previously for York a big problem, our lack of grade A large floor plate office space, can actually now become a real asset, because I think that the nature of the working world has undergone a fairly seismic shift through lockdown. We all, I think, are quite desperate to get back in the office, but not in the same way. So I think this is time for a new office offer that concentrates on that less formal. It's not about desks, it's about spaces in which to collaborate, it's about spaces in which to socialize and meet on a less formal basis. And I think that will lead to a different office model, and one for which I think York might be very well placed. I think we're trying to badge York as the best place to work from home. It has so many benefits to it as a city that if we can create the office offer that goes with that offer as part of maybe a kind of recasting of what we've already got, and then a redesign of new office space on York Central, then we stand to be big beneficiaries of the shift in working practices that we've seen as a result of COVID.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that, Tracy. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Daubney. If I could just ask a quick supplementary to that, in terms of the inward investment, where's the target for the inward investment? Where's it most likely to come from?
In the short term, I think the main target is within the UK. So it's around that whole approach to what is clumsily referred to as north shoring, i.e. people moving out of London. We're seeing that in terms of people moving to live in York, and a lot of interest in terms of businesses coming to York as well. So the concept of having an office outside of London, which is still within 2 hours of King's Cross, and in somewhere where your workforce would love to be, and has actually got a really well qualified, skilled workforce around it. I think that's probably the strongest position at the moment. Foreign direct investment is going to be much harder, particularly as we go through Brexit with all the uncertainty about what that will mean. But we are seeing actually, I'd say, quite a lot of interest in terms of businesses wanting to find space that ain't in London, and York is seen as a good place for that to be.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hollier.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks everybody for the comments, particularly around the sort of inclusive growth element of the strategy. It's really good to see how that hopefully will sort of form the heart of it as we sort of go forward and produce it over the next few months. Clearly, as we sort of start to come out of this pandemic, hopefully over the next sort of months, and presumably a fair bit beyond that, that sort of inclusive growth agenda will be really important. That actually the growth that we do have from here benefits everybody in the city basically as much as possible. I just had a couple of questions. First, I guess related to that, in terms of the reference to a sort of just transition, which is paragraph 7, page 4. I was just wondering if somebody could give us a bit more of an explanation of what that sort of means. We're slightly suspicious of phrases in commas, but it sounds good anyway on the face of it. But just a bit more detail on that. And then secondly, obviously the report was written just before York Business Week. I was wondering if we could get a bit of an update on how that all went, any outcomes of that would be useful to know.
Who's going to have a go at just transition?
I'll have a go at that if you like. I mean, I think you can think of it as a parallel term really to inclusive growth. So it's saying that if we go to a low carbon economy, what we don't want to see is that meaning that loads of people lose their jobs. And that although we're greener, we're poorer and it's harder to live here. So it's around making sure that works at all levels in society, that transition. Hence the word just. In terms of York Business Week, we actually had a surprisingly good York Business Week, all online, and very much founded on that partnership approach I've described before. So rather than it being something that Make It York went away and did, it's something that we all worked on together, and there were really strong sessions with, for instance, with some of our new members for Federation of Small Businesses. Councillor Wall and myself were on a session there with the Institute of Directors. We're thinking around the larger economic issues at play, both from Make It York's opening conference of the week through to our own events on Friday, where Tracy hosted a session looking at the local economy and thinking about how we build back from COVID. And then in the afternoon, there's a Q&A session with the leader of the council on the economy. So lots of good events, particularly strong events around skills and apprenticeships, which I know Councillor Waller was involved in. A really good broad range of themes in there, and good attendance actually for online events. And we moved, because it was all online, we've gone from a position where previous York Business Weeks have all been around paid for events, and you have to shell out 20 quid to come along to anything, to something that's actually much more open and available to people to come along to online. So I think in the circumstances, I think we can be really pleased that it was a very successful event, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our colleagues at Make It York for all the work they did on organising it, and indeed for all our partners in terms of the work that they did in pulling events together in Business Week as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waller, you indicating you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. I'll embarrass Simon by thanking him for his work during Business Week, but I think it did pick up many of the new links that we have with a variety of businesses. And just to pick up Councillor Hook's comments, it did cover the geography of the city as well as the different sectors, and I think it's been important to get lots of new voices from the practical side of running businesses. And just to comment on the just transition, I think that's something that that Mark Carney, as former Governor of the Bank of England, has been championing, in terms of we can't have another situation where lots of pit villages are left bereft of jobs. So a similar situation as Simon portrays, but it's also looking at those businesses that if they don't plan for climate change, climate resilience, then they themselves will suffer. So it's about responding to the need for a sustainable economy, whilst ensuring, as other councillors have talked about, good incomes to people in a wide variety of jobs within the city.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Waller. Councillor Pearson, you've been very patient, sat on your own there in the Guildhall. If you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for your report. I guess I've got a couple of things. Firstly, the 10-year recovery plan, which is in development. I wondered where we were with that, and the work with partners, and what priorities they'd highlighted to us. And I'm also wary that Brexit's around the corner. So I just wondered what work is being done there in terms of helping businesses through the transition period.
So just touch on, if I can start with the Brexit question, because it's easier for me to answer that. Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of work out there. We're publicising every week in terms of our bulletin, all of the workshops and online events that there are for businesses to help them think through that. We're working closely with the team at DIT and Bays, who are spearheading the efforts in terms of encouraging businesses to do the paperwork and help them do that. We're also working closely with the Local Enterprise Partnership, who have been given short-term funding for an additional 5 business advisors for the period over the start of next year, trying to make sure that as many businesses in York as possible can take advantage of that. The challenge, of course, is that we are still trying to prepare people for the unknown to a very large extent, but we're doing everything we can within that and following government advice and guidance around that. We hope that because we've got that outreach, that level of reach out to businesses, that even those who are thinking actually doesn't apply to me are maybe thinking again. I know conversations we've had in our sector roundtables, for instance, have highlighted some businesses that actually suddenly realised they got a lot of their coffee from Italy, and then maybe they did need to think about filling the paperwork in. You know, it will affect everybody, even if nobody thinks it's going to affect them. And we just that's the message that we need to get across, is everyone needs to think about it from their own business perspective. I say the challenge is quite what people are thinking about. It still, unfortunately, is not clear even now, and I doubt it will be. What did Councillor Waller said? It was 41 days to 38 days to Brexit today. So yes, we're doing everything we can in the circumstances. In terms of your question around the 10-year delivery plan, that is something which is being dealt with by the central policy team, but perhaps Tracy or Neil might be able to say more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the 10-year plan in terms of the economic strategy has to set its horizons on a world which is very difficult to imagine. I remember being with my son at school selecting GCSE subjects, and the statistic flashed up on the board that in something like 67% of the jobs that our children are likely to be going to fulfill when they leave school haven't actually been invented yet. And I think it's envisioning in a strategy a world which is it's going to be more high tech than the one that we live in at the moment, and a lot of the work on the 10-year strategy has been led by Charlie Jeffrey at University, working through the outputs from the university in really important sectors for our economy. So biosciences, biotech, agri-tech, and the kind of green economy element of it, where we will be generating new skills, new jobs that don't yet exist. I don't know whether Andrew and Neil, you want to comment on that piece of work that obviously the economic strategy plays into, but it's the segue between the recovery from COVID, the shaping of the known world, migrating into a plan for the city which doesn't shy away from those very different futures.
and I would concur with that, Tracy, but I would just add to members for your consideration that devolution asks as well. The devolution asks that when to full council, there's a huge, substantial ask for the North Yorkshire area as to what the vision for the future. So carbon negative as a region, looking for sort of deep retrofit in domestic housing. So part of that is the investment in skills necessary to deliver that. Land use planning. So as we come out of Europe, the cap disappears. Government has yet to determine how it's going to allocate the money that previously went into the cap. So all that's going to start to interface with the new combined authority should that come to pass. So there's a lot of work happening on constituent parts. But as Tracy said, the future is very uncertain, and particularly so at the moment as we're going through the COVID crisis. So I think it's an evolving piece. Focus at the moment is on that year one strategy, but it's certainly, there is lots of component parts that have been worked on. And when we start to see some clarity on some of those bigger issues, I think they'll pull together and start to form the basis of a 10-year plan. See, Councillor Waller's indicated.
Not least the biotech investment that we are waiting on. That I think everybody around this table would agree should just be released. Councillor Waller.
Yes, thank you. It's been interesting, particularly during Business Week, talking to businesses who have themselves started this thought process. I appreciate that many are battling to keep their businesses running, but it's actually given many businesses the reason to take stock and to cast ahead at where they think they will be in terms of what skills they will need. And it was interesting discussing with Portakabin their own requirements. So it's something that is very topical, but also I wouldn't want people to get the impression that it's purely for PhDs in white lab coats. The new jobs cover a very wide range of employment opportunities, and there is considerable engagement at all levels, but appreciative that new skills will be needed.
Okay, I'm just going to take a couple of more questions, one of which is my own, and the only other hand I'm seeing up is Councillor Douglas. So we'll take a couple more questions, then we'll wrap up this section. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on the skills aspect, I think something that we haven't really spoken about is the absolute deficit of digital skills, not at all levels of educational attainment and employment. And without that across the workforce, people are really going to struggle to move into the jobs of the future. So I really think the council needs to have a look at how we increase the digital abilities of all of our residents in the city, because it excludes so many, and that's skills plus access to devices and internet as well. So I just say that for now, but going back to the economic strategy and suggestions for what we might do with that, I'm really of course the strategy is overarching principles, which of course we understand, but I know, and Simon, Councillor Daubney will agree with me here, we have had strategy after strategy in York trying to particularly address the underemployment and low wage economies that haven't actually had the outputs and the results that we've been hoping for. So I'm just wondering when we're going to see the detail of how we move from strategy to what actually needs to be done and how we will measure success on that. And I think we've not had enough of that in strategies in the past. And I think it's a real focus point that we can't afford to ignore. So if you could just give me some detail on that, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
So that
Neil, did you want to
sorry.
Oh, sorry, Simon. Simon, did you want to go first?
If that's okay with me. I was just going to say that to me ties back partly to what I've been talking about in terms of the engagement we've been doing. You know, if we can develop a strategy that actually is understood and chimes with our business community, then it's not about the council telling people that they ought to be doing something different. It's about how we all work together to achieve the world that we want. And so, for instance, when I'm talking about 21st century jobs, this can't be something that we use to go around and try and beat businesses up with. This is around how we work with businesses to think about how they could employ people more flexibly, and how they can recognise the other responsibilities that their employees have in the city in a way that actually will benefit their business. I think we've seen through COVID, I would say in many ways, increased productivity from people working more remotely and flexibly. And what's been really heartening to me is the change of attitude we've seen in terms of people saying, I've just got to go and pick the kids up from school. And instead of getting a very disapproving look, actually everybody accepting that that's a perfectly good thing to do. And if you allow your employees to do that, it makes them more effective and more productive. So working with businesses, I think, is the absolute key to making sure that we have a strategy which isn't just a document which sits on the shelf and which we can say was the world's greatest strategy, but actually it does achieve change. And we will, of course, we need to build into it metrics around how we measure the economy and how we measure the performance of the strategy. But I'll say it's also founded on making sure it's about collaboration and us working together, and not about somebody having the cleverest strategy which then nobody else understands.
It'd be good to get some clarity on those metrics. I've got to say, since COVID, I've started sleeping in my workplace. Neil,
just to add to Simon's point, obviously we've got the issue of the primary objectives here. We've got in our strategies about influencing, because as we've talked previously here, and it was reported to executive in June, the amount of central government funding for economic development and skills at a local level is at probably an all-time low. So our ability to actually have a fully funded action plan in respect of our economy is incredibly curtailed at the moment due to the lack of funding. So just to sort of help manage expectations. So therefore, we have to use, as Simon's highlighted, the maximum level of influence. I would, however, hopefully some silver lining and Simon will correct my memory if I've got it wrong, but back in June, Askham Bryan was awarded £1 million by the LEP for the digital media training.
Institute of Technology, indeed, yes.
You were talking about that the city needed to invest in, Councillor Douglas. So just if you weren't aware of that, Askham Bryan received £1 million earlier this year.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to open the LEP can. We've kept that can closed all night, and I think we better keep it that way. We'll be here for another hour, I think. Tracy.
I just wanted to absolutely agree with Councillor Douglas about the need for our strategy not to just be a set of dusty principles on a shelf, but to being accompanied by a plan that's actually going to change things. And Neil's point that it's not always us that's going to be doing the work is an absolute key one. This is going to be the work of all city partners and all businesses to be able to turn this one round. But I've got an example of where I think we are in a slightly different place on the journey. I joined the council 20 years ago talking about the lack of digital skills in the city, and they're still there. But as part of the COVID response, we had businesses telling us that at that point they had realised that the bit that they were missing skills-wise was on the digital front, and they needed to be able to pivot their business models. They needed skills that they didn't have. We're now working with them on developing, as part of the grants program, a kind of voucher system for skills development, where they will be actually kind of shaping what the requirements are before we define what the training is going to be. And I think we'll actually start to see something on the ground. It is relatively modest in terms of the value of it, but it's an actual practical interaction with businesses that's going to address an immediate skills need. And it's that kind of initiative that we need to build upon.
Okay, thank you. I've got 10 questions, but I'm only going to ask one because we need to bring this session to a close, really. Hopefully it'll be a quick question. When you were pulling the strategy together, did you consider going down the circular economy route, looking at trying to persuade anchor institutions to purchase locally, the so-called Preston model? Did that influence your thinking? Did it at all, or did you think about it and reject it? Did you give it any consideration?
I don't think it's I mean, we haven't used those words in the report so far, but I think it's we are working with our anchor institutions in terms of the universities and things around all of that, and our focus has been. I think it's important to think about. I mean, anchor institutions are typically very large employers. But there's actually, if you look at where people are employed, there are more people employed in small businesses in York than there are in large businesses. It's just that it has traditionally been much harder for us to work with those businesses.
Are you saying a bit, Simon? Am I hearing a bit? We thought about it a bit. Neil?
No, I'm not. Sorry, I'm saying, yes, it's there. It's not the heart of what we're doing.
Simon,
the heart of what we're doing is small business.
I think definitely it's there, Pete. The voucher scheme that Tracy's just alluded to, that's effectively looking for small businesses to educate local small businesses. So wherever possible, we're looking at making sure we invest in a self-fulfilling strategy for the city. So we build the capability to train and deliver in the city. So it is part of the thinking, but I think, as Simon said, there's a certain degree of baggage that comes with the Preston model and circular economy, as it was effectively public sector spend led, rather than looking at the economy more broadly.
Let's not get into a debate about the ins and outs of the Preston model. Councillor Douglas, I'm going to go to you for the supplementary, and then I'm going to give last words to Tracy, because she had her hand up first.
I'm just wondering, given what we've just heard about anchor institutions, and in fact, it's not just the public sector, it's across all sectors. Large employers spend a lot of money in the economy, and we'd like it would be beneficial to York to bring it into York. But I just wanted to remind everybody that the LEP totally believes in the anchor institution model and has had a conference around it. I think it was in late 2019. So please don't dismiss it. They think it's the way to be going.
And if I get the last word on that,
Tracy,
Chair, then I think the circular economy is part of our thinking. We are working with the LEP on their work on circular economy. We're working with the FSB on small businesses and the circular economy, and that's actually emerging out of businesses as being a direct result of COVID, which when it comes out of the mouth of businesses, you then know that there is some real reality and chance for this to change. I think we need to translate that into something that large anchor institutions will actually sign up to and buy into.
I think Simon's making a bid for the last word. Simon, go on. It's your report. You finish off.
Yeah, we want the York model, don't we? Which may be influenced by other places, but it's a York model because ours is a special place, and it's a different place, very much different from Preston.
Okay, as I said, I'm not going to open up the whole Preston model discussion. Okay, thank you very much for the report, and thank you very much, Tracy, Neil, and Councillor Waller for all of your input. I think we better take a short break. I'm going to call it 7 minutes because it's 3 minutes past 7 on my clock. So let's get back at 10 past 7. 7 minutes is enough time to make a cup of tea and brew it properly. And we better go, I think, because as Councillor Pearson, you look as though you're slipping to go about to get your head put on a spike there in the Guildhall. So yeah, if we can just, if you'd like to turn off your videos, and let's be back at 10 past 7. Are we back on live streaming?
We are, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that, and welcome back, everyone, to the second part of the Economy and Place Policy Scrutiny Committee. We have one more item to look at today, which is the plans for the development of York Station frontage. We've received quite a comprehensive report on this. Thank you very much for that. That was sent in, and we have a number of officers joining us to talk through this item, and we have Councillor de Gorn, the exec member responsible for the item, with us too. So we have new faces on the screen. Tony, would you like to introduce yourself to the worldwide audience?
Hello, yes, it's Tony Clark here. I'm the Head of Transport at the City Council.
It's gone again. Thank you, Tony. I'm experiencing a little difficulty with my internet. I'm just going to go and try a different source. Just bear with.
We've lost it, haven't we?
It's back.
I can hear you now. Right? Can people hear me? Am I coming
We can hear
through?
you now, Pete. Yep.
Okay, we're slowly getting there. I think you're all moving very slowly. Okay. Oh, hang on. You're still not fully functional here. Apologies for this. Let me just. Okay, let's try that. Okay. Sorry, Tony, if you could just introduce yourself again. Apologies.
Hi there, yes, it's Tony Clark here. I'm the Head of Transport at the City Council.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Okay, let's move into the agenda item. Who is going to take us through the report? James, if you'd like to give us an overview.
Okay, thanks. So it's probably myself and Tony will do a bit of a double act on this. So
great.
The report before you is a exec report due to be considered on Thursday at executive. It's an update report on the project, setting out the delivery methodology and seeking early funding for the enabling works for the project. And they're required almost regardless of the final design. As you've noted, Chair, the scheme is the subject of a planning application. Design, as ever, is a process of evolutions and gateways which firm up the design as you go through the process. And it was almost exactly 2 years to the day that Executive considered the community engagement and involvement plan and agreed a refined design based on the outcomes of that community engagement and consultation. At that decision 2 years ago, Exec agreed to the submission of a planning application based upon that design. There are, of course, differing views in the community, and the purpose of that consultation was trying to balance those differing views. We've continued to meet with groups, including both the Civic Trust and the Bus Forum, both during that initial consultation 2 years ago, as well as an ongoing engagement with both officers and members, including within the last few months. The decision by Exec 2 years ago to submit a planning application was in effect setting what was in scope and what wasn't in scope for that design. Through a planning process, as you'll be aware, we continue to address the details that emerge through that formal planning consultation, and that is the piece of work that is currently ongoing. The report before Exec this week doesn't actually talk about the design, it talks about the enablement works and the partnership approach. But given design has been talked about, I'll touch on it slightly about what is and isn't possible and some of the constraints of the project. This scheme requires an absolute partnership between the local council and the rail industry. In really brutal terms, it seeks to take space that currently is owned by Network Rail to increase the highway space so that we can improve the pedestrian experience, take vehicles out of the portico and the loop which the taxis exit through. There is also improved bus arrangements which have been supported by bus operators. All of that comes with a bit of a caveat that whenever we take land off the rail industry, they have some conditions to that. And ensuring that the car parking provision, which they currently have, is maintained is a key part of their condition of allowing us some of that land. As ever, in a constrained space, we have to juggle the competing demands for that highway space. We can't make everybody happy within the constrained space we've got. By taking more space for highway land, we achieve to improve things, but we will never get everything given the space we've got. So the report sets out that partnership approach to delivery, talking about what the rail industry will help us do in terms of delivery. Much of it is on their land. So Tony will take you through the content of the report and what the recommendations mean.
Right. Thanks, James. I'll summarise some of the items, run through it quite quickly. But just to run through the background for this scheme, the overall objective was to improve the transport interchange between all modes at the front of the station, particularly improve the provision for pedestrians on the main route to the city centre. And part of that process was to reduce conflict between vehicles and pedestrians, particularly in the Tea Room Square area. Also to provide cycle routes past the front of the station, provide an improved bus interchange, increase the bus stop capacity, and provide a turnaround and layover facility for longer distance routes, and create a space for the interchange by demolishing Queen Street Bridge and changing the layout of Parcel Square area. So the planning side of things, we're now in a situation where there was a master plan for the full scheme was submitted in 2018. An addendum following comments which had been raised was submitted in March 2019. And those key features of that are demolition of Queen Street Bridge and construction of a new highway, reinstatement and construction of earth ramparts and retaining walls to part of the city wall, part demolition of the station buildings around Parcel Square, and construction of a new facade, roof and canopy and associated works. And I think as part of that process, I should note that working with Network Rail and tenants to minimise disruption of the consequences of those changes. Also to improve to the public realm and highway improvements along Queen Street Bridge and Station Road, and includes the construction of a multi-storey car park. I'm expecting the planning committee is expected to be in January or early in the new year. There are 5 main delivery packages. As James has said, we're working closely with key partners, Network Rail and LNER, and we've split that through to the enabling works package, which the council will lead, using obviously utilities to undertake the actual work for changing the diversions of utilities. Queen Street Bridge removal and highway works, again the council-led scheme. The station works package, which is the changes to the station buildings themselves. We're looking for LNER to lead on that package, acting as a project manager on the works in the station area. There's a loop road around the Railway Institute, and that will be led by the council. And then there's the multi-storey car park itself, which allows the consolidation of car parking in the area and creating the space for the short stay car park and the taxi drop-off areas, and that's led and funded by Network Rail. So the total cost of the station frontage works, excluding the multi-storey car park, is £26.6 million, and that also already includes a risk and contingency allocation of £4.5 million. The funding for the scheme is primarily from government grants administered by the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and they're split into the Transforming Cities Fund and the West Yorkshire Plus Transport Fund. We have got a pressure on the budget, a scheme of this scale, and with what we're trying to do, and we will be looking at ways of mitigating those risks and cost reduction processes to seek reductions in the overall cost of the scheme. So the recommendations, a summary of the recommendations is that the executive asked to approve the project scope, the budget, and the delivery strategy for the scheme. Increase the station gateway budget by £12.25 million to reflect the West Yorkshire Combined Authority Transforming Cities funding. Delegate authority to complete land purchase items. Delegate authority to place orders with utility companies to deliver the enabling works, and delegate authority to commence detailed design of the scheme itself. And then there will be future reports running through to the executive as we work through those processes and take it forward to procurement of the actual scheme itself. So that's a summary of the report that's taken forward.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Tony, and thank you, James, who seems to have dropped out. Just before we get into questions, and Councillor Douglas, I see your hand. I'll be coming to you in a minute. Just in terms of the funding, the 12.250 million, where's that coming from, as it were? Is that council money that's coming from a central grant, or coming out of general fund, or where's that coming from?
No, that's through the Transforming Cities Fund from the government. It was a bid that was put forward by West Yorkshire Combined Authority in association with City Council here. So it's a fund which is funding a number of schemes across the Combined Authority area, including York and including parts of North Yorkshire as well, for schemes like station improvements. It's for improving the infrastructure for transport within the urban area.
Okay, thanks for that, Tony. Councillor Douglas.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Councillor de Gorn. I have to say that I tend to agree with many of the speakers about questions around, does this fit within our carbon zero by 2030 commitment? And also, why is there not more focus on an integrated transport approach in this project? So I'm asking you, can you explain to me how you see this fitting in with those two remits? But also, is this ambitious enough? Should we be thinking bigger in terms of climate and transport, and how this is an opportunity to make a long-term change for York? Thank you.
I think firstly I would say that you've heard the history of this project. It's a project which has been funded through central government funding via the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, which we're an associate member. So it has already gone through a number of stages, as you've heard. There was a consultation which came forward with a master plan. There were comments from that. I'm certainly aware that the cycle provision has been significantly improved compared to the first version. I know that's only one small element, but important nonetheless, that it is more attractive and going to be much safer for cyclists accessing and passing along the frontage of the station than the original design. You've heard the speakers in terms of the question of a bus station and on the level of parking, and those questions that I've been asking officers as well. We've had, as you've heard, ongoing dialogue with both the bus forum and the transport group of Environment Forum and York Civic Trust have had significant input to the design. But as you've heard, the major constraint in all this, it's maybe somewhat ironic that we're talking about a sustainable travel partner, but nevertheless their sort of criteria for taking part and contributing to this project is that they want to retain the facility they currently enjoy in terms of parking. So that is a key element of it. And as you'll note, I think fairly significant change from the first iteration, which I saw. There was, in the first iteration, there was a contribution from the funding towards that car park. That is now it's still part of the project, but it is proposed that it would be entirely funded by Network Rail and owned by them. So that's part of the programme. I think Neil wants to come in on this as well.
Neil, if you want to come in, then Councillor Douglas, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, thank you. It's just if Network Rail were here, because I've heard them articulate the argument to officers, because we've pressed very hard on behalf of the City Council, because we know that this is an aspiration members a key concern about the car parking provision. They would respond and say that they're forecasting significant increases in the footfall and usage of York Station, and there are actually plans proposed under the Northern Powerhouse Rail and under HS2 for an additional 2 platforms at York. So the numbers using York Station will go up dramatically. So therefore the proportion of users using cars as an interchange form will drop as a percentage quite significantly, because they're looking at numbers that well in excess of doubling the capacity of York Station over the next 10 to 15 years. So just to that's obviously not my argument, that's the point that Network Rail have been clearly making to us in terms of their own forecasts around station usage.
Councillor Douglas, if I can just ask you to pause while Tony Clark comes in. He's waiting to make a point.
Yeah, I think just the key point I think to say is, although we are demolishing Queen Street Bridge as part of the scheme and taking that down to ground level, it is still a very, very constrained site to try and do everything that people want to try and achieve there, to provide an improved interchange for sustainable modes while still maintaining short stay car park, taxi rank services, long stay car parks as well. It is a very, very tight space, and we have put across what we feel is the best approach to balance up all of those needs.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Douglas, you had a supplementary, then I'll come to Councillor Daubney.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Councillor de Gorn said that speakers and people who had comment have had the chance to have input, but Mr. May from the York Civic Trust actually said that he had put in some concerns in August and hadn't had a chance to discuss these with anybody at the council. Can you just give us an update on where that kind of, and he's not the only one that I've heard that from either. Can you tell us about how engagement's going and when it stopped? Thank you.
Well, certainly I would say I don't think Mr. May was involved, but the Boss Forum did ask specifically for a discussion about their proposal, and I facilitated a meeting which involved officers and LNER and the representatives of the Boss Forum to explore that within the last month. So there has been ongoing discussion. As you've heard, in terms of bus provision, it is a very tight space to actually fit everything into. The sort of concept which the Bus Forum have put forward is not something which is in accordance with the bus operators' vision about how they see interchange taking place. They don't want something which involves them having to turn around and turn around again to access a facility more like a sort of traditional bus station. They prefer the layout which we have on this. So, from an operational point of view in the short term, I think we have got the best possible layout. But I think the other thing I would say is that the timescales that we have and the reason that layout we have at the moment is still there and hasn't been changed over all these years is because of the large cost of removing all the services that currently run over that redundant bridge. And that's a significant cost which this government funding gives us the opportunity to actually address, to relocate some very expensive pieces of kit away from the bridge so it can be demolished and create that extra space to transform the sort of arrival experience for people coming to the city. At this key point when they come out of the station and see the station in front, they will actually have a much better experience. And also part of a design will be to open up that access underneath the archway, which was created in Victorian times for the railway to come in through the walls. That archway will be opened up for a better public access more directly into the city. So it is quite a major benefit to the city to be able to take this opportunity and move that forward.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearson. I've seen you, but first we go to Councillor Daubney.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to make the point, and I appreciate this is certainly not a planning committee, and that I need to choose my words carefully. Just in general terms, the railway companies will be concerned to preserve the fact that their customers have a choice of modes of transport to get to and from the station. And some, of course, when the early trains to London will require transport to the station in cars normally, long before Park and Ride gets up and going. So we need to, I think, recognise that they'll want to keep that choice open to their customers.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Daubney. I think that was more of a point really than a question, so I'll move on to Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, officers, for the report. As I say, I need to be very careful what I say here for being an employee of LNER, but I just wanted to hear from officers really how important the railway is to York. So how important it is that we support this scheme, not only in terms of the visitors that the railway brings to York and the money it brings to York, but also the jobs that are supported by the railway in York.
Who's going on that? It's an open goal. If anybody would like to kick the ball in, Neil.
Yeah, so I think Councillor Pearson makes a very good point in terms of York and the railway industry have been intrinsic since the birth of the railway industry. 6,500 jobs. It's a key industry. If Simon were here, he would tell you it's one of his key target industries for the economic strategy in terms of what opportunities for the city to grow. In terms of our visitor economy, retail, and our status globally, 10 million visitors, 10 million users a year at the moment go through that station. And as I've said, the work that Network Rail have been doing in terms of forecasting, they're looking for those figures to double, if not triple, by the time you get to sort of 2050. So the sheer scale and importance to the city can't be underestimated. And from the perspective of central government, the funding that's been put forward for this scheme, but also for York Central, has been very much linked to the fact that the site is right next to the railway. This is an incredibly attractive site for central government to invest in, hence the enterprise zone, the housing zone, and effectively the £155 million of predominantly central government money that's been afforded to York Central. So the importance of rail cannot be underestimated. And I think also this proposal is very much welcomed by the rail industry. So again, it's that symbiotic relationship of, it's not, I think James portrayed it very well, that the rail industry's requirements for the use of their land, but I think it's also for us as the council to reflect that the use of the highway on behalf of the rail industry is really important to them as well. So it's important in both ways. We're important to the railway industry, the rail industry is important to us, and what you have in front of you, as Tony said, is the best compromise we can come up with between a city walls that we all want to preserve and a railway station and a railway industry that needs to be successful and thrive.
Thank you. I'm seeing no other hands, so I'm gonna jump in and ask, how secure is the funding?
Well, I might just say part of the reason that the report is coming forward for members on a phased approach is that the funding is time bound, and Tony can talk about the time bound, but it's important and imperative that we get on and start to deliver this, and this is the first phase, and I'll pass to Tony to talk you through the actual phasing of the
There's two main funding streams that we're using. The West Yorkshire Transport Fund, which maybe has a longer time period that could be spent over, but the Transforming Cities Fund in particular is a tight sort of time limited fund which we need to spend by March 2023. So that is quite tight in terms of this particular scheme because of the enabling works, demolition of the bridge and those elements. So we need to run on as quickly as we can to get it on the ground.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from any members? We have no more questions from members. Okay, let me just put a couple of the questions that were raised by the speakers. Will it be able to take enough buses?
I think if I respond back on it, the design, we've worked very closely with the bus operators and looked at future provision as well. So there is a certain amount of future capacity in there. Again, what I'm saying is it is a very tight site that we're working around. We have moved the main interchange element further to the south, probably to avoid that conflict with the crossing that we've put in across the inner ring road, and to move it from the conflict at the far end.
I think one of the speakers intimated that it would only take 50% of the planned buses or the forecast buses. Any comments on that?
I think our designers are confident that the number of buses that operate in the area, I mean, indicatively in the planning application, we're increasing the bus stop capacity from about 120 buses an hour to 212, so that there is a significant improvement there. Also, as we say, there are changes proposed as part of the York Central scheme that potentially some of the bus services that currently come to the front of the station will operate from the rear of the station. So there's a bit of there's a change in the way some of the routes are moving around the area, with the particularly the park and ride routes.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of the funding from the scheme has come from West Yorkshire, and the history of the scheme is, like a lot of things in York, these things are developing, like York Central, after many years of trying to get there and get things to change and happen and develop. And to some extent, it feels like we're maybe playing catch up, and we probably need to integrate some of these a bit more with the strategy for the city. And I wonder if maybe Andy might talk about how we can integrate these schemes and designs into things like the local transport plan 4.
Well, certainly there's lots of pieces in the jigsaw in terms of what's happening within the centre. You've, as you said, there's York Central, and part of York Central is developing, as quite a few stations are doing, developing a new entrance of a disabled, accessible, much more attractive entrance to the west side of the station. But also we've got the Castle Gateway project, which will transform another part of the city centre. So there's sort of areas that are being developed in parallel. Obviously, it's a challenge to make sure that people can still get around while these changes are taking place, but the vision is very much to have more integration of transport, to have more sustainable transport options, to maintain the park and ride system, which we've currently got. But as you know, we've got the electric park and ride buses, helping to tackle the air quality issues in the city. So all those sorts of changes are part of developing a long-term vision for sustainable travel in the city.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions, members? Okay, back to the public speakers then. One of the public speakers mentioned that there is a target to reduce car parking by 21%. Is that something that's been considered?
I think that target was what was happening in Wyker, wasn't it? Not a York related figure.
Is that something that was considered for this project?
Well, I think that would fit in. No, it's a policy not relevant to York. It doesn't have its geography in York. Obviously, reducing car usage, it's the lowest mode of transport in our current local transport plan. In any development of new local transport plan, we could look at things like that about reducing the number of car trips. But as has been sort of communicated, the rail industry rely on some of that. And indeed, LNER's commitment to government when it made a bid for that franchise was around some of that income going to government from the parking income. So there are sort of commitments made right up to central government about some of that parking income in relation to the station.
Seems everyone's dependent upon car parking income. How much in reality, how much control does the City Council have over whether or not there is a multi-storey car park there?
I think my answer would go back to what I said at the beginning. If we want some of that land, we need to negotiate with the rail industry. They have said that to get some of that land for highway purposes, they want the car parking retained. So, you know, on that basis, yes, we could potentially, you know, escalate it to government and go, the rail industry aren't playing ball with us. But that seems a rather extreme measure when we are, you know, trying to work with a partner to deliver a project. In the same way we have stuck to our guns on some principles of saying you're not having a single car parking space more than you've got now, which is one of the sort of positions the council has adopted. We need to recognise what their positions are as well.
Okay, thank you. And the other question. Oh, sorry, Neil, did you want to come in?
Just to pick up on James's point, the starting position from the rail industry was that they wanted, I think it's a 20% uplift in car parking spaces. So we made that abundantly clear to them that you as members would not support an increase in car parking spaces. So actually they've demurred down to the current level. So just so you're aware that that was their starting position.
Okay, thanks for that. And the final question from the public. I'm looking around members. I'm not seeing anybody desperately trying to get in. So final question from the public. There was a question raised about future-proofing of the site, which I think was related to an increase in public transport use, but to my mind, it could be related to developments in autonomous vehicles, that you on-demand vehicles as opposed to car ownership. What's been built in to future-proof the site? Oh, everyone's trying to come in on that one. We'll go to Neil and then we'll go to James.
So I'll just start off high level. The scheme I think has been highlighted by officers is a compromise because it's constrained between the station and the city walls. So it's future-proofed in terms of it's significantly increasing the capacity of that space, but that space in terms of its constraints will not be removed in the future. So whatever we come to in the future would, if it was to change, would just require a different balance. And I think that would be my point in terms of future-proofing. Pass on to James.
I think just some of the innovations we're trying to look at so that it's actually, there are some positives in terms of the future. So things we're looking at is next to the taxi rank is electric charging points. So actually we can have more of the taxis in the city running on electric. Most of the taxis run in and out of the station. So actually putting some charging infrastructure there is the most likely place for it to be used. So some of those sorts of things we are doing. As you, as a committee may be aware, we are sort of one of the big DFT test pilots for future transport. So our STEP program is doing exactly that across the city, not just around the station, in terms of how autonomous vehicles might work, the relationship they have with traffic lights and street signs, so that relationship it works, so that the idea is that you have communication between the highway infrastructure and the vehicle, not that the vehicle is trying to read highway signs in the way a human does. It knows they're there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor de Gorn.
Yeah, just to add, I think, as I said earlier on, the current layout there is very constrained, and just actually having the funding to relocate all those services so we can take that bridge down. If we didn't have that funding, the reason it's there hasn't been needed for the last 50 years is because of the costs involved of moving those services. So in terms of future proofing, for me, part of it is about relocating the services in a way in which that bridge can be demolished. And even if the layout is not exactly how we want it, once we've completed this project, it will be far easier to make changes. I mean, many people probably be aware the current layout has only been there for 10 years, but this itself makes a big step forward of removing traffic from any vehicles from within the portico, makes that more pedestrian public space rather than a place where there's vehicles going through it. And I mean, removes that pollution hotspot within the station, and sort of reconfiguring everything to such a way in which it can be much more easily adapted in the future, as and when it proves to be necessary. So I think, it's certainly vastly better, and a much better pedestrian experience coming out to see the walls and be able to actually walk underneath them as part of your route, rather than along a busy highway as the route into the city centre.
Okay. Does anybody know why the bridge was originally built?
Yes, I could answer that one for you. It was
everyone's hands up for that one.
Well, it's to get across the railway line that used to access the first station in York, which was built in 1840.
When was the bridge built?
Offices. I think it was probably built about 1900 or something like that.
Yeah,
so
early part of the century, and it's replacing a level crossing that used to be there.
So it was to ease the traffic, so it didn't have to stop at the level crossing all the time. Probably.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from members? Do we have no more questions from members? Okay, in that case, thank you all very much. That brings that section of the meeting to an end. Thank you all for your reports and your contributions tonight. First of all, members, do we have any urgent business? No urgent business. Okay, that just leaves us then to say, are there any recommendations, suggestions that we want to feed up from the meeting tonight? Has anybody got any recommendations or suggestions that we want to feed in, either to the team that's working around the bridge or to the economic strategy? Councillor Douglas.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to formalise something around the involvement of external organisations in the inclusive growth aspects of the economic strategy, and on a regular, meaningful basis. And the other aspect to that as well is that I'd like to see more emphasis on trying to increase the value in jobs in what we consider to be our lower paid sectors in retail, hospitality and care sectors.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Douglas. Yeah, I certainly didn't hear any mention of the local unions in terms of the business groups that were being consulted. So that might be something that needs to be thought about. Councillor Hollier.
Thanks, Chair. I thought in the answer from Councillor Waller that that offer is open to those organisations that we discussed before, and particularly in terms of the inclusive growth side of things. I'm not sure the value of sort of formalising that. But
we'll go to Councillor Douglas.
Yeah, I don't think an offer is good enough. I mean, saying we'll be happy to work with you. We need their input in what we're doing. We need their expertise. We don't want to say to them that this is something that we would welcome you letting us know if you want to be involved in. I think we've got to be more proactive than that.
Okay, Councillor Hollier, then I'll come to you, Neil. Councillor Hollier.
That's down to the capacity of those organisations. I'm not sure how the council could mandate that a non-council organisation would sort of be forced to be involved in something.
You're going to have to sit out this game of ping pong, Neil. Councillor Douglas.
I'm not saying about mandating. That's not the intention, but it's a firm commitment that a partnership is formed, which is what was discussed back in the Scrutiny Committee in January, that Councillor Pearson, Councillor Hook and Councillor Daubney were there as well at the time. I'm just asking for us to push that through in whichever way is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Neil.
Just to ensure, to reassure members that Councillor Waller has asked officers to ensure that unions are invited and involved with those formal groups to the extent as Councillor Hollier says they're willing to be involved.
Okay, thank you, Neil. I think, Councillor Pearson.
I was just going to say, I had a conversation with someone at the TUC the other week, and I believe that the TUC have been given a seat on the economic recovery something or other. I forget which group it is that they're on, but maybe Neil can confirm.
think it's the skills board, Councillor Pearson.
And skills board, I think, was mentioned. Okay, I think for me it was, and Simon referred to this actually, it was about trying to reach people with lived experience, is what he was talking about. So I think we need to go beyond sort of JRF and the university. We should really be talking to the citizens' advice bureaus, the advocacy organisations that work under York CVS, who work with people who are at the rough end of the York economy, and trying to find, it's not going to be easy and it might not happen, but trying to find people from those groups who can bring their direct lived experience into that conversation, so that we truly are including all the people of York as we develop an inclusive growth strategy. I would be happy to put that sort of recommendation up to Councillor Waller, and I think personally it would be quite well received. Everybody okay with that? Okay. All right. I'm not seeing any strong objections. Okay. Oh, Councillor Hollier.
Obviously, very happy to see other organisations be involved, but I think we probably just have to be careful that, you know, we're not sort of, I guess, delaying that economic strategy unnecessarily. Just need to make sure that they're involved to the extent that they can be, and we're not sort of saying that they must be in that sense. You know, the offer's been made, we're sort of reliant to some extent on those organisations having the capacity at what is a very difficult time to come back to us. So I guess it's, you know, on the basis that was said before, you know, happy to support obviously any organisation being involved, but I think we just have to be careful to not sort of tie people's hands or slow things down. But
Oh, Councillor Hollier, if only I could tie people's hands, if only we had that power. Councillor Douglas.
I'm really quite concerned that you think that trying to get input from experts in this area would hamper the economic strategy. In my opinion, it is essential if we're going to actually have some outcome, or you know, if we're serious about improving the employment situation of those in our lowest paid sectors, then we need to make sure we get that right. And if it means that it takes a few more weeks, I'm sorry, I think that's worth doing. But perhaps I'm on my own on that one, I don't know.
I think you have the chair support on that one. I'll come to Councillor Hollier.
I'm not saying it should hamper, I'm just saying we should be careful of the wording to make sure that those groups are involved to the extent that they wish to be. So we're not saying that they, you know, we can't force outside organisations. The offer's there. You know, it needs.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hollier. Neil, you're desperate to get in.
Just really a point of order, Chair. This item was item number 4 on the agenda. You're now on urgent business. The executive member has left, and we're now looking at resolutions associated and debate that could have involved the executive member.
No, we've moved beyond urgent business, Neil, and we are now discussing potential recommendations to the executive member, not with the executive member.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You've moved off the item on the agenda, Councillor Kilbane, and
excuse me, Mr. Ferris, this is my meeting, and I will chair it in the way that I see fit. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Hollier.
Just to confirm, then, what item are we on?
We are looking at, as we do at the end of all of these scrutiny meetings, looking at any recommendations that we can make to the executive member regarding the reports that have been brought to us tonight. If I am hearing attempts to frustrate the input from the most disadvantaged people in our economy into the development of our economic strategic plan, then I'd be very disappointed.
I'm not sure who said that. Just trying to do it in a way that...
Good. Right, okay, so in that case, will it be for myself and Councillor Daubney to draw up a recommendation along those lines that we can agree and get that into the exec member ASAP? Everybody okay with that? Yes, Councillor Daubney.
I think if we can discuss together the involvement of other groups and discuss that with Councillor Waller, I think that would be quite acceptable. Sure. But I think I take the point that Councillor Hollier has made that we shouldn't be seen to strong arm people. We should extend that invitation and make sure that invitation is heard.
Sure. Okay. I'm going to, Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. I'm more than happy to support yourself and Councillor Daubney coming together with some form of word. But yeah, I'd agree with Neil to some extent. If we're going to do recommendations on particular items, it would be useful to do them at the relevant point on the agenda at the end of the item. That would make more logical sense in my mind.
Your
anyway.
point is noted, Councillor Pearson. Thank you. Okay, so we'll do that, Councillor Daubney. Are there any other recommendations from tonight that you want to submit, in particular the station frontage? Anything about that people wanted to put in? Nope. No. Okay. All right. Well, in that case, well, that got nice and lively towards the end. We shall call it quits there, I think, this evening. Thank you all very much for your contributions. We're coming in at just before 8 o'clock, and I'll see you all at the next scrutiny meeting. Thank you. Thank you all.
Confirm that